They called it the Varntal 9 Resolution Arena, though most beings across the galaxy knew it by its less ceremonial name, the Sandpit. It was a vast, sun-scorched depression carved into the moon's crust, ringed by artificial dunes, lined with force-field viewing decks, and infused with just enough atmosphere to support the average number of lungs per participant. It smelled of irradiated cinnamon, melted rubber, and the kind of diplomatic stress that came with three species threatening war over mineral rights and historical insults. Today's event was billed, officially, as a tri-species dispute settlement duel. Unofficially, it was carnage wrapped in protocol. 200 billion viewers were already tuned in, the broadcast signal smeared across 14 time dilations and a dozen moral frameworks. This wasn't sport. This was spectacle sanctioned by bureaucracy, violence with a dress code. Inside the arena, the crowd shimmered in their pods and perches, species of every imaginable morphology shouting in dialects that hadn't agreed on verbs for centuries. Giant moths fluttered in soft applause. Feathered serpents rattled betting tablets. Sentient gas clouds puffed out nervous bursts of color, shifting their odds based on the direction of the breeze and the quality of planetary omens. They were here to witness a public reckoning between the Zrothi Dominion, the Christian Syndicate, and the Valaxi clans, three powers who hated each other with ritualistic professionalism. Each had accused the others of espionage, border violations, and galactic fashion theft. None wanted full war. But no one wanted to back down either. So, they summoned the old rite. A duel. A champion from each side. A neutral battleground. No weapons beyond what one could carry. No interference once the sand settled. The last combatant standing would win planetary rights for their faction. This time, however, there had been a complication. Earth had joined the Accord Council 2 years ago, late, small, and uninvited. As per bureaucratic logic, all new members were required to offer a neutral champion every few rotations. A formality, usually. A symbolic gesture. An offering of presence, not power. No one expected Earth to send anyone at all. And certainly not what they did. The announcer's voice, stretched across every frequency and time band, boomed with anticipatory glee. Ladies, gentlebangs, and interspecies alliance observers, welcome to the Dunes of Decision. Today, you behold history. The arena's sand trembled as the first gate opened. Out lumbered Commander Gralix the Woundless, champion of the Zrothi Dominion. 9 feet of chitinous muscle, armored in plates forged from the bones of failed uprisings. He carried no visible weapon. He was the weapon. 2 clawed arms. 1 tail. And a reputation for winning arguments by punching through walls. He bellowed once, a sound like tectonic plates grinding in rhythm. The crowd roared back. The second gate lifted. From the crystalline ranks of the Christian Syndicate came Varello's Prime, a being of fractal facets and cold light. Every movement cast reflections in 1,000 directions. Each step left scorched sand in its wake. Its voice, when amplified, sounded like a lullaby played backward by a furious god. It raised a hand. The audience's retinal implants dimmed in defense. Then came the third gate. And the laughter. A figure emerged slowly, not with power, not with blinding energy, but with an unsettling calm. She rode atop a tall, indifferent camel, draped in dust-colored gear. Her uniform was military standard Earth tactical wear, sleeveless, sun-stained, with body armor shaped more by utility than aesthetic. Her gloves were cut at the fingers. Her eyes were hidden behind matte aviator shades. A long-barreled sniper rifle lay across her lap like a sleeping viper. And she was chewing gum. The announcer hesitated. And, from neutral planetary entity Earth, representing the human coalition of, Another pause. Then a new voice, drier, less certain. Combatant, Mira Thorn. Class, human. Rank, unlisted. Weapon, analog projectile rifle. Mount, non-sentient terrestrial mammal. Tactical status, unclear. The arena blinked. Carl the camel blinked back. Mira shifted her weight slightly and leaned to pat the camel's neck. "Let's try not to spit on anything political," she murmured. From the viewing decks above, High-ranking officials of the Tri-factions leaned forward, suddenly aware that they'd either just witnessed the most catastrophic misunderstanding of interstellar protocol, or something that would require rewriting the definition of unexpected variable. In the Valaxi clan's private skybox, a diplomat adjusted the lenses on his chest lungs and hissed, "Is that a joke?" A Zrathi general snarled, "They're mocking us." The Crystern archivist, flickering in place, tilted a crystalline cheek. "Or they're daring us to laugh too soon." The betting kiosks exploded with activity. Odds on Earth defaulted to symbolic wagers, bananas, trinkets, small IOUs of shame. The highest estimate gave Mira 20 seconds of survival. A sentient sponge placed a bet that she'd shoot her own camel out of confusion. Mira said nothing. She simply unslung her rifle, checked the bolt with a fluid click, and scanned the horizon through her scope. Her face didn't change. Not when the announcer declared her odds. Not when a drone camera hovered a meter from her face and tried to provoke a smirk. Not when a roar of laughter rolled through the stands like a wave of condescension. She breathed once. Counted. Adjusted her posture. On her HUD, low-tech by comparison to the others, barely more than a wristband, one single notification pinged. Mission clock. Midnight. Begin. The combatants were called to center. Gralix stomped toward the ring, his claws gouging trenches into the dust. Varello's prime hovered just above the ground, emitting a dull hum that melted nearby particles. Mira rode Carl. Slowly. No fanfare. Just a woman and a camel moving toward two apex predators with zero regard for optics. The intergalactic arbiter, today represented by a levitating orb of bureaucratic tentacles, floated down to the ring. Its voice boomed. Under Article 12 of the Accord's Violence Mitigation Protocol, this duel shall be considered legal, binding, and sufficiently dramatic. Gralix snarled. Varello's shimmered with lethal anticipation. Mira adjusted her sunglasses. Combatants, do you swear to fight with honor, within agreed parameters, until one of you yields, dies, or is otherwise disqualified by cowardice or humiliation? Yes, said Gralix. Yes, intoned Varello's. Mira tipped her head slightly. Yeah, sure. That. The arbiter spun once, then declared, "Begin," and vanished in a puff of scentless bureaucracy. Gralix leapt first. Varello's flared in counter. And Mira did not move. She watched. Just watched. From atop a camel whose only real concern was a slowly encroaching patch of dry scrub. The crowd howled for blood. Weapons activated. Energy arced. Dust exploded. Combat began in earnest. But Mira remained still, rifle across her lap, unmoved. Because she wasn't here to play the game. She was here to redraw the board. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would remember why snipers don't start with noise. They end with it. Carl was unimpressed by galactic war. He blinked again, and then chewed his cud with the unimpeachable serenity of a creature who had seen worse days and cared even less. Artillery strikes? Sandstorms? Two alien warlords flexing in opposite directions? Carl did what camels had done for centuries. Outlasted, outweighted, and when the mood struck, outspat. Mira Thorne sat in the saddle, her rifle cradled with the unconscious ease of someone who'd carried it longer than some species gestated. She wore her tactical gear like second skin, adjusted at the seams, sunbled at the edges. Sleeveless in defiance of etiquette, her exposed arms were lined with tiny scars that suggested precision more than chaos. Combat gloves cut at the knuckles, a utility belt with only what she needed, and aviators that had survived 2 planets and 1 almost marriage. She watched. Not the crowd. Not the noise. Not even the duel. Not directly. She watched angles. Trajectories. The slight shimmer in the heat where Varello's energy flares bent the air. The timing in Gralix's stomps, off by half a beat every time he favored his dominant leg. The battlefield was loud, chaotic, theatrical. Her mind was quiet geometry. 30 meters ahead, Gralix bellowed and hurled a chunk of sandglass the size of a hover car toward Varello's. The crystal being shimmered sideways, refracting through dimensions in a way that made most viewers blink involuntarily. Dust kicked up. Energy crackled. Mira stayed still. Carl huffed. Another shot rang out, Varello's retaliating with a burst of sonic heat that cracked a ridge behind Gralix. The crowd roared again, thrilled by the scale, oblivious to the nuance. Her fingers moved without urgency, adjusting the scope dial a fraction, rotating a lens she'd filed herself back on Earth, before her name had been erased from official records. It wasn't vanity. It was utility. Mira Thorne didn't believe in customizations unless they answered a question the factory hadn't asked. Behind her, the betting orbs jittered with confusion. Payouts had stalled. No one knew how to calculate her odds anymore. One Krellian pundit shouted, "She's not participating," while a Valaxi commentator muttered, No, she's calibrating." The arena's announcer, desperate to keep viewers engaged, pivoted to sarcasm. And there's the Earth combatant, ladies and beings, strategically observing from her noble desert steed. Perhaps she's waiting for a solar eclipse. Mira didn't hear him. Or maybe she did and simply didn't respond. That was her way. She'd learned early in her career that silence, when used correctly, echoed louder than speeches. It gave people space to project their own anxieties onto you. And anxious enemies made predictable targets. They'd sent her to 10 worlds before they stopped assigning her officially. Some thought she'd gone rogue. Others thought she'd retired. The truth was simpler. She'd finished the jobs that couldn't afford to fail. Now, for reasons buried in a folder marked Expedient Symbolism, Earth Command had called her back. "We need a representative," they'd said. "No," she'd answered. "It's ceremonial. I don't do ceremonies. You can ride in on a camel." That made her pause. Who's the enemy? They'd listed names, stats, atrocities. She packed her bag. The camel, she sourced herself. Gralix roared again. This time, closer. Sand skidded. Varello's flared with refractive armor and shot into the air, levitating just enough to taunt. Mira leaned forward, gently stroked Carl's neck, then murmured, "He'll jump soon." Muscle tensions shifting. Carl grunted. Myra's eyes tracked the crystalline shimmer in the far ridge. Varello's had changed tone, gone defensive. Mirror tactics. Which meant she lowered her scope, just enough to examine the debris fields around them. Angles. Reflections. If Varello's pivoted off the glass at the right time. She snapped the scope back up. Adjusted. No shot yet. A nearby drone zipped into her face, hungry for content. She didn't look. Just slid a spent shell into its lens and tapped it gently. It veered away, confused. The crowd roared again. But this time, it wasn't for the spectacle. It was because Gralix had turned. His eye stalks had locked on to her. He was coming. Not by chance. Not by fury. By decision. Even in his rage-swollen limbs and tooth-grinding battle lust, he'd finally realized the third combatant wasn't passive. She was patient. Mira slid down from Carl in one fluid motion. The camel shifted but did not flee. His part was nearly done. She patted his flank once. "Stay stubborn." Gralix charged, chitin glinting in sunlight. Sand blasted up behind him. He bellowed something in Zrathi, possibly a war cry, possibly a curse, possibly a crude joke about her species' dental fragility. Mira kneeled in the sand. Her rifle came up. The scope hummed with sunlight. She adjusted for dust wind, temperature shift, and the low hum of Varello's energy signature bleeding into her side vision. Gralix moved fast. Faster than expected. But not faster than math. Her finger tightened. Paused. Not yet. Let him commit. Let him leap. And leap he did. All 8 limbs off the ground, claws arched, roaring with everything he had. The crowd held its breath. Mira fired. Not at him. At a reflective shard half buried behind his shadow. The bullet struck. Ricocheted once. Then again, off a cracked beam left by Varello's earlier blast. The trajectory arced behind Gralix. The round skimmed across his back armor. Not piercing, but delivering a shock just as he landed. He twisted. Stumbled. Overcorrected. Hit the sand chest first. Mira stood. She didn't run. Didn't advance. She stepped 3 paces right, into the shadow cast by Carl. Gralix, snarling, rose with sand clinging to his mouth. His rage turned raw. But now there was calculation in it, too. He wasn't facing prey anymore. He was facing something colder. Mira reloaded. Single motion. Quiet. Like a sigh. The audience didn't cheer. They watched. Varellos hovered above them both, observing now. Measuring. Mira's scope swung past Gralix, onto the glimmering arc of refracted light, where the next shot would have to go if the Christian joined in. She didn't fire. Not yet. Her finger rested just above the trigger. Not because she was uncertain. Because she was precise. Carl snorted, as if bored. Gralix blinked once. Then backed a step. The crowd made a sound somewhere between shock and awe. It wasn't a retreat, not exactly, but it was something no one had predicted: respect. Varellos floated down, closer now. Still distant, still unreadable. But for the first time, neither opponent spoke. Because for the first time, they weren't sure what Mira Thorne would do. And in the absence of certainty, even monsters get careful. She lowered her rifle a few inches. Not surrender. A warning. The terms of the fight had shifted. It was no longer about strength. Now it was about who could survive the geometry. Varello's prime hovered at a calculated angle, refracted light casting razor-sharp shadows that danced across the dunes like blades. Its crystalline facets pulsed with internal energy, rhythms only understood by those with spectral cognition. To most, it looked beautiful, deadly, cold, and mathematically perfect. It had never lost a sanctioned duel. It had never been touched. Until now, it had never paused. But it was watching her. Mira Thorne stood half-shadowed beside her camel, the stock of her rifle steady against her shoulder, her expression flat, unreadable. The heat shimmer bent around her, warping her outline to anyone watching through distance or distortion, but she didn't move. Not yet. Not until the numbers said so. Her boot was half buried in the sand. Not a misstep, not fatigue. She had planted it there with purpose. The subtle shifting weight of it compressed the soil in a way she could feel through the soul. It told her when the dune shifted, when the echo from the last footstep faded, when the battlefield breathed again. She blinked slowly, precisely, as Varellos descended. Gralix was limping now. He tried not to show it, but his gait had slowed by microseconds. He circled wide, snarling less with rage and more with deliberation. He had begun to sense it, too, the shift in the match's center of gravity. Mira wasn't the outlier anymore. She was the axis. And both titans, for all their mass and myth, were beginning to orbit her. Across the arena, the crowd was eerily still. Betting streams had frozen. Commentators spoke in whispers now, uncertain how to narrate a story that no longer followed protocol. Mira's rifle was back on her shoulder, not aiming but always ready. Her left hand lightly traced a familiar groove along the barrel. Not ritual, habit. That scratch had been there since Vovo's 3, when her squad walked into a minefield designed to trigger only when you tried to retreat. She had learned something vital then. Motion without thought kills faster than hesitation with a plan. Carl snorted beside her and took a single step forward. Sand shifted. Mira's fingers twitched once on the grip. "Steady," she said softly. Varellos made the first move. It emitted a burst of photon flare that bent the light above the arena, crafting a brief, radiant maze of illusion. Not to attack. To misdirect. Varellos didn't lunge like Gralix. It played angles, refracted expectations. It knew its strengths, and it knew how to confuse. Mira didn't flinch. The flare burst bloomed just long enough for Varellos to disappear from the visible spectrum. For most. But not for her. Because Mira wasn't tracking movement. She was tracking silence. She dropped to one knee. Rifle up. Breathing shallow. Through the light, through the shimmer, she watched dust patterns. 2 grains floating out of sync behind the fractured dune ridge. It was enough. She didn't fire. She waited. Because this wasn't the shot. Gralix lunged again from the left, claws wide, legs surging through the sand. This time, not for spectacle. This time, to interrupt her. Varellos appeared simultaneously from the opposite side, emerging from the flare, shimmering with destructive intent. Twin converging forces, bearing down from both sides, calculated for overrun. Mira remained still. Then she moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. A three-step pivot, a turn of the hip, a lean into the moment. She fired once, not at either target directly, but into the sand ridge between them. The round hit a hidden reflector drone from earlier, one of the autonomous camera units that had been damaged during the first clash and buried under sand. Her shot didn't destroy it. It activated its emergency diagnostic beacon, an infrared flare that bloomed hot and wide in less than a second. Varellos, mid-phase, recoiled as its sensors overloaded. It blinked out of shimmer mode, optics blinded. Gralix didn't see the flare, but he saw Varellos falter, and charged. Exactly as Mira expected. She fired again, a fraction of a heartbeat after the first shot. This one wasn't for misdirection. This one was perfect. The round curved, slightly, almost imperceptibly, guided by a gravitic ripple she'd mapped back when Gralix's first strike dented the arena floor. It wasn't magic. It was math. Time, pressure, dust density, residual energy pulse from Varellos' phase field. The bullet sang through the air. Hit Gralix's forward knee, just the tendon cluster, nothing fatal. Enough to throw off the angle of his leap. He crashed mid-swing, veering off course, his claws slicing empty air where Varellos had been. But Varellos wasn't there anymore. It had shifted backward, unexpected, uncalculated, right into the collapsing trajectory of Gralix's fall. The two titans collided. Crystal on chitin. Fury on calculation. Gralix struck first, by accident. Varellos retaliated, on instinct. A blast of kinetic energy fired from its chest core as it twisted away, shattering part of Gralix's armor. The impact knocked them both backward, dazed and disoriented. And for one long moment, silence returned. Mira lowered her rifle. Not in victory. In preparation. The real shot hadn't happened yet. Because this was just rearranging the board. Her enemy wasn't Gralix. Not Varellos either. Her enemy was the assumption. Assumption that humans didn't belong in this arena. Assumption that analog meant primitive. Assumption that patience was weakness. She stood now, dust clinging to her knees. The wind caught her jacket, lifting the edge of the old Earth flag patch sewn under the shoulder. Not visible to the crowd. Not part of the uniform. Just hers. She raised her rifle again. One round left. Varellos struggled to regain its hover. Damaged resonance. Its refractors flickered. Gralix grunted, one leg dragging, claws twitching. And then, she fired. Not at either of them. She fired straight up, toward a shattered spotlight drone still barely functional above the arena dome. The round struck the power relay junction. The light grid shorted. Darkness fell. Not total, but enough. Shadows warped. Shapes twisted. Gralix turned toward Varellos. Varellos saw the movement and retaliated. Their blows collided. Not for Mira. For each other. She stepped back once, twice. Then holstered her rifle. The crowd erupted in delayed realization. She had ended the fight without killing anyone. Without striking either opponent in their center mass. She had simply made them fight each other. By math. By misdirection. By knowing exactly when not to shoot. The intergalactic arbiter's voice returned. Late. Rattled. Combatant Mira Thorn. Stands uninjured. Both opponents incapacitated. Victory determined. A pause. Then softly, Earth prevails. No cheer. Just silence. Then, from one corner of the arena, a single mechanical clap. Then another. Then an uproar. Not laughter. Not mockery. But something else. Oh. On her HUD, a final notification blinked. Mission time, 9 minutes and 48 seconds. Task complete. Mira turned back toward Carl. The camel blinked, snorted once, and resumed chewing. Mira swung back into the saddle. The wind picked up behind her. She didn't raise her hand. Didn't wave. She just rode away, eyes forward, rifle slung low. Behind her, 2 legends lay broken in the dust. And a galaxy finally realized. The shot they feared most was the one they never saw coming. Carl's hooves made no sound in the dust, just a soft shift of sand as Mira Thorne rode from the battlefield with her rifle slung low and her silence loaded. Behind her, 2 galactic champions still twitched in the dunes, Commander Gralix with half a leg refusing to cooperate, and Varello's Prime humming like a dying power cell, its refraction sequence cycling erratically. The battle was over. Neither had yielded. Neither had died. But Mira had walked away, which, in galactic law, made her the winner. Above, the drone orbs that hadn't been fried tried to refocus. Commentary across 12,000 systems came back online in overlapping bursts of confusion and accidental reverence. Most races didn't even have a word for humble dominance, but they were learning to invent one on the fly. In the floating VIP gallery, a Trivian ambassador dropped her diplomatic chalice and didn't notice. A Christern functionary had fainted outright. The Valaxi contingent began drafting new engagement protocols, ones that included psychological disorientation by quadruped. Because the image was unforgettable. A human sniper riding a camel out of a war she didn't start, winning with 3 bullets and no explanation. The arena announcer tried to find his voice. And Earth's champion exits the field, victorious, unharmed, disengaged, and it seems uninterested in a post-match statement. In the viewing pod reserved for Earth's delegation, located somewhere near the kitchen and behind a very vocal steam vent system, a junior liaison named Dev stepped back from the railing, trying to remember how to breathe. I think she just ended a war, he whispered. The human ambassador, a former accountant who once filed a tax audit during a firefight, nodded numbly. No one's going to remember our quarterly trade projections now. On the field, Mira rode with the same unhurried rhythm she'd kept since arrival. She didn't gloat. She didn't even look back. There were no medals waiting. No anthem cued. Only recalibration. At the gates, 3 Accord security drones hovered, blocking her exit. Combatant Thorne, one crackled in a tone designed to be neutral and accidentally passive-aggressive. Per rules of victorious engagement, you are required to submit to debrief, celebratory footage, and a minimum of 3 post-battle interviews. No. There was a pause, as if the program hadn't considered rejection. Clarify, the drone said, voice warbling. I'm done, she said. You are refusing the honors? I didn't come here for honors. Then why? The drone asked. She tilted her head slightly. Because someone needed to remind the galaxy that assumptions make very poor armor. Carl spat at the drone. It hovered backward with a whir of alarm. Mira nudged Carl forward, passing through the gates without further objection. Outside the arena, the sand stretched wide and empty, a blistered gold under the high twin suns. The horizon shimmered with heat and anticipation. She'd memorized the terrain on the way in, mapped by elevation and shadow. Now it welcomed her like an old friend. The diplomatic transport meant to ferry her back to Earth's orbiting envoy ship sat half-sunk near the edge of the ridge, its boarding ramp lowered and ignored. A figure waited beside it, arms folded, dressed in standard Earth Command black. General Halverson. He didn't salute. Didn't speak at first. Just watched as Mira dismounted, handed Carl a pouch of sun-dried cactus meat, and walked over with her rifle still in hand. I told them you wouldn't do the ceremony, Halverson said finally. They told me not to do anything risky, she replied. So I made it look like I didn't. Those 2. Still breathing. Enough to learn from it. Halverson squinted. You always go for the nerve clusters instead of the kills? I go for the blind spot. You know the Dominion's already called a closed council. The Christern are demanding a weapons analysis. Someone filed a formal protest that your camel was psychic. Mira smiled, faintly. Carl's just better at strategy than most people. The general hesitated, then reached into his side pouch and handed her a small data stick. Footage. Yours to review. Clean copy. I won't need it. I figured. He nodded at the transport. You ready to leave? I'm always ready, she said. But it's not always time. He nodded, letting the silence sit. Then, why did you really agree to this? She turned to face the desert again, her back to the arena. Because Earth needed someone quiet enough to be remembered differently, she said. And loud winds don't echo as long as silent ones. Halverson didn't argue. She boarded the transport alone. The pilot, a fresh-faced corporal whose boots were still too clean, tried to offer a compliment. That was amazing, ma'am. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Mira gave him a nod, adjusted her sling, and replied, Then maybe it worked. The hatch sealed behind her. Within minutes, the ship broke orbit. Across the galaxy, news feeds scrambled to title what had happened. Some called her a ghost, others a prophet of modern war. A Christian cultural advisor dubbed her the one who calculates in dust. But Mira never gave them a quote. She let the footage speak. Let the tremor in enemy policy do the talking. And somewhere, in a war room far from the battlefield, a species that once laughed at Earth's military quietly redrew the boundaries of acceptable threat. Because Mira hadn't just won. She'd rewritten the question. Not who's the strongest, but who's been watching all this time, saying nothing, and choosing exactly when to end the conversation. She sat back in her seat, closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, slept with both boots on and no one behind her. Mic drop, courtesy of Camelback.